Okay, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We're going to go back a long time to the Summer of Love, 1967. And Timothy Leary and other people. Hang on one second here as we start it up. Okay, so we are going to go back a long time. My name is Evan Weiner, and I was 11 years old back in 1967. And I remember quite a bit of this, and then as I got older, I was able to absorb it. It was called the Summer of Love, but I'm not sure it really was the Summer of Love. How many of you remember Timothy Leary? Yeah, he told you to drop out, didn't he? Tune in and drop out. And this is Newark, New Jersey. Certainly not any love there. Summer Love, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. How many of you bought that record back in 1967? And it's also the Six-Day War in Israel. Jimi Hendrix, Monterey. Jimmy plays Monterey Pop Festival. In the Old Guard, California, Ronald Reagan becomes the president, the governor of California. So was the 1967 the Summer of Love or the Summer of War? Actually, it was both. There were hippies in San Francisco, and I'm not sure what a hippie was because they left no ideology. But there were hippies in San Francisco, there was a war in Vietnam, there was a war in the Middle East. The psychologist Timothy Leary told 30,000 hippies, well, that's what they were called, 30,000 people in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, turn on, tune in, and drop out. He's telling you to take drugs, like LSD. There was rioting in the streets in Detroit and in Newark. Do you know any of these people? You didn't know any of those people when you were around in 1967? They don't look familiar at all?
They look familiar.
They look familiar. They looked like that, didn't they? They are probably all now about 76 to 80 years old.
Wow.
That's, but they were, what, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. So what was a hippie? Anybody know what a hippie was? What was a hippie? Have any idea?
Music.
It was music? Well, it was nothing. There was no such thing as a hippie. It was just a term. This is in a bakery in San Francisco at the Fisherman's Wharf. And it's a bakery downstairs, and it's a little cultural history of San Francisco from its founding through now. You buy your bread and then you go upstairs. Summer of Love, the hippie counterculture movement culminated with the Summer of Love. By the fall, sayings like feeling groovy. Remember the 59th Street Bridge song by Simon and Garfunkel? Paul Simon hates that song, but anyway, he wrote it. And it gave way to make love, not war. Chants as youth protested the escalating conflict in Vietnam, staged marches and sit-ins on behalf of civil rights. In the United States, the summer offered two narratives. The story of fire bases, napalm, jungles, and the draft. The other, communes, LSD, flower, and rock music. And San Francisco was the epicenter of both tales. San Francisco, across the bay, is Oakland, California, right over the Bay Area Bridge. U.S. Army, Oakland, port of embarkation. And that is the place where many Americans spent their last day in the United States before shipping off to Vietnam. And it was not very far from the so-called hippies in San Francisco. The San Francisco Bay was often the last place a service member would see before heading off to war. By 1967, the United States commitment in Vietnam had escalated to 500,000 from 23,000 men and women in 1965. Years ago when I was doing this talk, a woman said, I was in Vietnam. I was an aide. It wasn't just the boys. It was the girls too. With more than 200,000 shipping out from the Oakland Army base. Again, back to the bakery. Haight-Ashbury and the hippie convergence. As 70 million baby boomers came of age, many resisted middle-class shackles and advocated free speech, free love, and psychedelic enlightenment. Between 1966 and 1968, the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood became the scene of the hippie movement and gave rise to the San Francisco rock sounds of artists like the Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, Quicksilver Messenger Service, Janis Joplin, Moby Grape, Country Joe and the Fish, the Great Society, and the Steve Miller Band. Steve Miller is the only one who is still active, although he did not tour this year. Sitting by the dock of the bay. So 1967, how many of you watched the Super Bowl? That's it? Just 2 people watched, 3 people, that's it? Watched the Super Bowl? Well, the Super Bowl was not known as the Super Bowl when it started in 1967 on January 15th. It was known as the American Football League, National Football League World Championship game. There were a lot of empty seats there. It was the only, it was grandfathered to be called Super Bowl I. It's the only Super Bowl never to sell out. It was played on January 15th. The Green Bay Packers defeated the Kansas City Chiefs 35-10. And that was the start of an American tradition, although nobody knew it at the time. The Apollo 1 disaster, that's Gus Grissom and Ed White and Roger Chaffee, who was 32 years old. And some of this I got from my friend Dick Hull, who is living in Florida now. He's 88, 89 years old. And when I do my Going to the Moon talk, I use some of his notes because he worked at NASA between 1960 and 1975. Apollo 1 was supposed to be the first low Earth orbital test of the Apollo Command and Service Module with a crew, and that was supposed to launch on February 21st, 1967. A cabin fire during a launch rehearsal test at Cape Kennedy on January 27th killed all 3 crew members, Virgil Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger B. Chaffee. The capsule was destroyed. What it was it put pure oxygen in there. There was a spark, it blew up. They had like 15 seconds to get out of there. It took about a minute and a half to get to them. And within 60 seconds they were dead. Richard heard what was going back and forth between the ground crew and also ground control, and he said, you don't want to ever hear that audio. Smothers Brothers. How many of you remember the Smothers Brothers? Oh, a lot of you liked them and watched them. Well, they came on the air because CBS was getting too old in terms of their programming. Ed Sullivan, been around a long time. Lucille Ball, been around a long time. Red Skelton, been around a long time. And others that have been around a long time, and they were looking to get younger or younger audience. In those days, they were looking for people between, say, the ages of 25 and 34, and they figured these guys, the Smothers Brothers, would bring in that audience of 25-year-olds who now would be approximately 83 years old. On February 5th, the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour premiered, and it was a very different type of variety show. Tommy and Dick Smothers fought a long-running battle with CBS during the show's 3 years run over scripts and guests whose off-air politics were deemed controversial by network censors. This is April 4th, 1967. This is at the Riverside Church up in Upper Manhattan. Anybody ever been to the Riverside Church? You have. You have. It's a gorgeous church. Gorgeous church. Anyway, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gives a speech. And the speech is, I'm against the war in Vietnam. And he said that somehow this madness must cease. Burn your draft card. Anybody know anybody who burned their draft card? You did. Did they go to jail?
No.
No. They pay a fine?
No.
No. Well, you could have gone to jail for burning your draft card back in the 1960s. It's April 15th at the Sheep Meadow in New York Central Park, and some 60 young men, including a few students from Cornell University, came together to burn their draft cards. And they did it in a Maxwell House coffee can. Why that? You could have got Senka, you could have got U-Bahn back in those days, but they decided we're going to use a Maxwell House coffee can. They did. Maybe it was Passover. Those are the only coffee cans they could get in the New York area at the time. In San Francisco, there is a big demonstration on April 15th. Spring Moby protests take place in New York City and San Francisco, founded in November of 1966 as the Spring Mobilization Committee to end the war in Vietnam. Muhammad Ali is not joining the armed forces, and he would become, well, he was quite a controversial figure anyway by this point, because he had become a member of Elijah Muhammad's Islamic group. And he decides he's not joining the armed forces. It is April 27th, 1967. It is Houston, Texas. Muhammad Ali was drafted by the United States military in 1966, called up for induction in 1967. On April 27th, he attended the induction ceremony in Houston, but refused to answer his name or take the oath. And there he is after refusing to say his name or take the oath. And he said, "Why should they ask me to put on a uniform and go 10,000 miles from home and drop bombs and bullets on brown people in Vietnam while so-called Negro people in Louisville," he was born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, "are treated like dogs and denied simple human rights?" And that is me, and that is Ali in 1985. Unfortunately, by the time this picture was snapped and somebody said, "Hey, Chan, take a picture with him," they took the camera out. We didn't even have a chance to pose. This is about the best we could do. The Parkinson's had kicked in, also 60,000 punches to the head, and he could barely speak above a whisper in that picture. The New York State Athletic Commission and the World Boxing Association stripped Ali of his world heavyweight title, both without due process. They didn't ask him. They just said, "Hey, it's gone. You're no longer the champion because you refused to take the oath." He faced the penalty of 5 years in prison or a $10,000 fine, or both. His career was effectively over. The Six-Day War, just another installment in what has been going on in the Middle East since 1948. In April 1967, the skirmishes worsened after Israel in Syria fought an air and artillery engagement in which 6 Syrian fighter jets were destroyed. That is Nasser. He is the president of Egypt, and he doesn't worry about whether his intelligence is real or if his intelligence is faulty. He's going to go to war. In the wake of the April air battle, the Soviet Union provided Egypt with intelligence that Israel was moving troops to its northern border with Syria in preparation for a full-scale invasion. The information was inaccurate. The Israelis were not doing anything of the sort. But it nevertheless stirred Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser into action. In show of support for his Syrian allies, he ordered Egyptian forces to advance into the Sinai Peninsula, where they expelled the United Nations peacekeeping force that had been guarding the border with Israel for over a decade. He's gone. Get out of there. We don't want you. On May 22nd, Nasser banned Israeli shipping from the Straits of Tiran, a sea passage connecting the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aqaba. A week later, he sealed a defense pact with King Hussein of Jordan. And so the Six-Day War begins. In the weeks leading up to the war, Syrian and Egyptian leaders made no secret of the fact that their joint coalition army was coming to destroy Israel. At the same time, Jordan was warned by Israel, stay away from the conflict. On the morning of June 5th, Israel staged a sudden preemptive air assault that destroyed more than 90% of Egypt's air force on the tarmac. A similar air assault incapacitated the Syrian Air Force. And it's just time to really mop it up. Just mop it up. Within 3 days, the Israelis had achieved an overwhelming victory on the ground, capturing the Gaza Strip and all of the Sinai Peninsula up to the east bank of the Suez Canal. And Egypt didn't want the Suez Canal back. Rather, the Gaza Strip back. They want the Suez Canal, but They didn't want the Gaza Strip back. It's Moshe Dayan. Got an interesting story about Moshe Dayan, told to me for a guy who worked with Edward R. Morrow. And he said Morrow was over in Israel, 1957, 1958. And he's up in a helicopter. It was Joe Worshper who told me the story. Joe and his wife were working with Morrow at the time. And he said that as they're flying the helicopter, Morrow is just smoking and smoking and smoking and smoking. And Moshe says to him, Moshe Dayan says to him, why are you smoking that stuff? That stuff's going to kill you. Nothing wrong with smoking a few cigarettes. Well, he was right. Morrow died in 1965 of lung cancer. And that Joe and Shirley Worshper told me that story. They worked for Morrow at CBS. Israel was led to victory by its then Minister of Defense, Moshe Dayan. Israel doubled its size by conquering Jerusalem, the Gaza Strip, Sinai Peninsula of Egypt, the Golan Heights of Syria, and the West Bank. And of course, they're still fighting over the Gaza Strip. Arab leaders met in Khartoum, Sudan in August and signed a resolution that promised no peace, no recognition, no negotiation with Israel. Well, this thing comes out on June 1st, 1967. It's Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and it is the album of the year. And it's a different album. It's supposedly a concept album, but there's really no concept. Concept albums were nothing new. Frank Sinatra did them in the 1950s, and they were basically a series of songs telling a story back in the Sinatra days in the 1950s. This doesn't really do that. All kinds of different stories. In Britain, the album hit #1 between June and February 1968, spent a total of 27 weeks at the top during an initial chart run of 148 weeks. All of this in spite of a BBC ban on the day in the life. Why? Because it has the lyrics, "I'd love to turn you on," which could be a drug reference or it could be a sexual reference, and the British people, according to the BBC, could not deal with a lyric like that. The album enjoyed a 15-week stay at the top of the US Top 100 albums and was on the charts for 88 weeks. Meanwhile, after this comes out, is the Monterey Pop Festival, which was the big cultural event of 1967 out in California. Featured nearly 36 well-known and unknown acts representing an eclectic mix of styles and sounds. Otis Redding was there. By the way, how many of you know his biggest song that he ever wrote? Otis Redding. It's not Sitting at the Dock of the Bay, even though that's the #1 song. His biggest song he ever wrote was Respect. Aretha Franklin did that song, Respect. That was written by Otis Redding. Otis Redding, Ravi Shankar, Mascalela had their first significant exposure at the Monterey Pop Festival, which also featured such well-known acts as Eric Burdon and the Animals, the Association of Birds, Jefferson Airplane, and the Mamas and the Papas. So while there was celebration in Monterey, there was this in Vietnam. And there was this in the streets of the United States. Johnson's a war criminal. No destruction in Vietnam. You don't have to answer this or not, but how many of you demonstrated against the Vietnam War? Anybody? 1, 2. It's usually women. 3. Usually women. Men don't tell me that they demonstrated against the Vietnam War. Where did you demonstrate, by the way? Cincinnati?
The Bronx.
The Bronx? The Bronx. The Bronx. The Bronx. Well, Johnson's a war criminal, and there were demonstrations, but they weren't against the Vietnam War till later in 1967 on college campuses. In the mid-1950s, during the Eisenhower administration, Vietnam split into North Vietnam, which was communist, and South Vietnam. Cold War anxieties dictated that if the North Vietnamese communists prevailed, the rest of Southeast Asia would fall like dominoes. When he took office in 1961, President John F. Kennedy vowed not to allow South Vietnam to fall to communism. January 19 1965, 5,400 men were called up for the draft. It wouldn't be until 1964, the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, that Americans began to really look at Vietnam, because the people who were stationed in Vietnam prior to August of 1964 were enlisted men, not draftees. All of a sudden, the draftees are going. By December of that year, more than 45,000 men were called. When the monthly draft call rose from 17,000 to 35,000 per month, young people across the nation began engaging in civil disobedience. This is Joan Baez. She's in San Francisco, Haight-Ashbury. This is George Harrison, Beetle George. He's in San Francisco, checking out Haight-Ashbury. Haight-Ashbury District, well, anybody ever go to Haight-Ashbury, by the way? I went there years later because I was only 11 years old. I went there in 1982, and they basically cleaned up the neighborhood by that point. Haight-Ashbury District was a community based upon countercultural ideas, drugs, and music. The neighborhood offered a gathering spot to create a social experiment that would soon spread through the nation. The hippie community had easy access to drugs, which was perceived as a community unifier. Haight-Ashbury, a local group called the Diggers, formed in the mid to late 1960s. This is about as close as you're going to get to what the hippies believed in, because they didn't believe in anything, apparently, worthwhile leaving behind. The Diggers believed in a free society and the good in human nature. They established a free store, gave out free meals daily, built a free medical clinic, which relied on volunteers and donations. Sounds good, doesn't it? So far, sounds good. Scott McKenzie. Remember Scott McKenzie? If you're going to San Francisco, be sure to wear some flowers in your hair. Anybody wear flowers? I can't do it anymore. Anybody wear flowers in their hair back then? Nobody? It's the first group I've ever talked to that nobody, not one woman wore a flower in their hair. Not one. Scott McKenzie. Basically that's the only song on that album that you would know, San Francisco. It became a hit. The Monterey Pop Festival cemented the status of psychedelic music as part of the culture and elevated local hate bands such as the Grateful Dead, Big Brother and the Holding Company, that's Janet Joplin's group, and Jefferson Airplane, the star of them. The Haight-Ashbury Summer of Love experienced and attracted a wide range of people of various ages, teenagers and college students drawn by their peers and the allure of joining a cultural utopia, middle-class vacationers and even partiers from the military bases in Oakland within driving distance all showed up there. I had a woman about 5-6 years ago who was in her 70s at that point, said, during the day I worked at the bank. At night I was partying there. I said, how'd you manage both lives? She said she couldn't after a while, and she gave up the party and the drugs in San Francisco because it began impacting her life. The funeral of the hippies. Do you know the hippies are dead? They were dead and buried. Dead and buried. Those are the Diggers. Haight-Ashbury deteriorated. Overcrowding, homelessness, hunger, drug problems, crime afflicted the area. Many people left in the autumn. Hey, we did our college, we did our summer vacation, time to go back to college, time to become what we're supposed to become. We've had our 3-4 weeks of partying. The woman who told me that she partied during the night in Haight-Ashbury and worked during the day said that it became run down and looked just like the Bowery. It was that bad. On October 6th, those remaining in the Haight district staged a mock funeral, Digger happening, the death of the hippie ceremony. Beetle George, George Harrison, his observation. I went there expecting it to be a brilliant place with groovy gypsy people making works of art and painting and carvings in little workshops, but it was filled with horrible, spotty dropout kids on drugs. Turned me right off the scene. I can only describe it like a Bowery, a lot of bums and dropouts. Many of them very young kids who dropped acid and come from all over America to this mecca of LSD. 90 miles away, you got Governor Ronald Reagan. And in Sacramento, Governor Reagan says, A hippie is someone who looks like Tarzan, walks like Jane, and smells like Cheetah. I interviewed Reagan in January of 1980 before he caught fire. I was 23 years old, and we were in Bear Mountain. Who holds a rally in Bear Mountain in the middle of January at night at the ice rink? Well, they did. So there were only 6 people there. I was one of the 6. Evan, you got a good future ahead of you. He was very charming. I have to admit he was very charming, and he could tell a joke. The summer of rioting. Withdraw the troops from Newark. Federal troops go to Newark. Youth Against War and Fascism. Free our black brothers. When I do this talk outside of the Newark area, whether it's Union, New Jersey, or it's West Orange and all, a lot of the Jewish community from Newark never left the Newark area. They just went about 7-8 miles this way, and that way. And I will put up some pictures, and occasionally somebody will say, oh, my uncle owned the store over there, or my father had a business over there. The summer of rioting, erupting primarily in East Coast and Midwestern cities, including Milwaukee, Buffalo, Tampa, and Cincinnati. The incidences resulted in more than 100 deaths, hundreds of dollars in property damage, and scores of burnt-out neighborhoods, some of which never fully recovered, like in Detroit. There are still burnt-out buildings in Detroit. Kraft Chick, somebody who I gave this talk to, said, oh, that was my cousin. He owned the curtain store over there. Anyway, U.S. troops on the streets of Newark, patrolling. And this guy looking behind his back, this guy's probably my age today, looking in Newark. June 27th, rioting erupted in Buffalo. New York, 200 people were arrested. July 12th, rioting in Newark, New Jersey left 26 people dead, 1,500 injured, 1,000 arrested. That 26 dead, 1,500 injured, those are war casualties. July 17th, rioting erupted in Cairo, Illinois. July 19th, rioting erupted in Durham, North Carolina. July 23rd through 27th, 43 people died in rioting in Detroit, 1,000 were injured, 442 fires set. Rioting in Detroit forced the postponement of the Detroit Tigers-Baltimore Orioles baseball game. July 24th, rioting erupted in Cambridge, Maryland. This guy is saying, pleading with people, hey, soul brother, don't mess around with my business. Please, leave it alone. We're open till 2 a.m. You know, don't harm my business. Really, do not harm my business. Meanwhile, this guy is in Louisiana, and he's volunteering. Can I help you? And the guy who's the head of the police or whatever there is telling him, don't call us, we'll call you. This is in Louisiana. Hey, I'll help out. Why were there riots? The unrest was a reaction to a larger problem. Deep-seated anger and hopelessness simmering in many disenfranchised communities, urban communities where rates of poverty, joblessness, and crime were disproportionately high. Excuse me for a second. Thank you, John. My radio career was made by this guy. Remember John Lindsay? Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the story real quick. It is March of 1978, the last Saturday in March. I'm 21 years old. I'm working for a little radio station by the name of WGRC. Nanuet, New York, in Rockland County. And my boss, who was all 23 years old at the time, Steve North, said Saturday the New York Democrats are meeting in Nyack. They're having a fundraiser and all. Just go there and whatever you get, leave it for Monday. Okay, fine. So I go in there and I start seeing the people walking in. There was Assemblyman Gerald Nadler. Ever hear of Gerald Nadler? Yeah, he walks in. And Hugh Carey, the governor of New York, walks in with his wife Evangeline. And Mario Cuomo, who was running for lieutenant governor at the time, comes in with his kids who are bratty and running all over the place. And there were others. This guy walks in. And he comes right to me, because I'm the only guy with a microphone. And for some reason, he said, and my hair, I got hair out to there in those days. I'm 21, and obviously I don't have clothes to match what these guys are wearing. And he comes up to me and says, I like you. And I'm looking at him, you like me? We have never met. I like you. I want to tell you something. I'm running for Senate, state of New York. And he's half drunk. He's half drunk. And so I take out my microphone. He tells me the story. I run back to my station. We got the story on. Then I send it down to AP and to UPI. And then I get a call from Henry Marcotte at WNEW Radio. How many of you listened to WNEW Radio back in the day? William B. Williams and those people? Anyway, so Henry says, hey, how would you like to do that story for us? I said, sure. How much are you going to pay me? $10. Sold. And that was it. And that started my career in New York City radio on WNEW, a station that was aimed for 55 and 60-year-old people. They played Nat King Cole and Frank Sinatra and the big band stuff and all. And here I am. I'm a scruffy kid of 21 on the station, which was supposed to be sophisticated. The other guy there, Lyndon Johnson, the president, and that's Otto Kerner. He is the Illinois governor. The Kerner Commission. President Lyndon Johnson established a bipartisan task force, the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders, known as the Kerner Commission, named after its chair, Illinois Governor Otto Kerner. The committee asked three major questions. What happened? Why did it happen? What can be done to prevent it from happening again? And there's John Lindsay again. And there's Lyndon Johnson again, the Kerner Commission. Well, these were the recommendations in 1967. 1967. Let's see how many of these recommendations came to be. Creating 2 million new jobs and 6 million new affordable housing units. Revamping the welfare system. Eliminating de facto school segregation. Eliminating abrasive police practices and establishing redress mechanisms. Improving news coverage of the problems facing black Americans, something that never happened. And I can tell you that because I'm in the business. Making local government more responsive to inner city communities. Okay, it's done. So is Lyndon Johnson going to do anything about it? The answer is no. The 426-page report was published in March 1968, sold over 2 million copies. So there were Americans who were very interested in this and earned a spot on the nonfiction bestseller list of the New York Times. The recommendations all but disappeared because Lyndon Johnson had a snit. The Johnson administration countered that the commission hadn't given the president enough credit for past civil rights legislation, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, 1965 Voter Rights Act, and Johnson later refused to support further research or even meeting with the commissioners. Get out of here, you didn't genuflect to me, so we're not going to do anything else. Women's liberation. Anybody take part in any women's liberation activities back then? Yes, no, yes, no. You did, you did. Now, advocated the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment, first proposed by Alice Paul in 1922. Enforcement of the prohibitions against sex discrimination in employment, maternity leave rights in employment, and Social Security benefits. Tax deduction for home and child care expenses for working parents, child daycare centers, equal and non-gender segregated education, equal job training opportunities and allowances for women in poverty, and the right of women to control their reproductive lives. This is 1968. Meanwhile, the Boston Marathon, that was 1967, I'm sorry. Meanwhile, the Boston Marathon, and that woman there, her name is Kathrine Switzer, and she had to break the rules to enter the Boston Marathon. Kathrine Switzer grew up as the daughter of a major in the United States Army, so failure was never really an option for her. While studying at Syracuse University, one of her coaches told her that a fragile woman couldn't run the Boston Marathon, so she trained in secret and entered the race. Got a question for you, for the women, just the women, not the men, just the women. If you are the weaker sex and you're fragile women and all that, how come you outlive men?
Because we're smarter.
Because we're smarter. Myron Cohn, remember Myron Cohn? the comedian? I knew Myron Cohen, lived on New Hempstead Road up in Clark's New City, New York. He would have said, "Cuz we want to die." We want to. Now, this guy here is Jock Semple. He's the guy who organized the race. That's Catherine Switzer. That is Tom Miller. And Semple looks like he's about ready to go like that, right? And they're running on concrete. And he's going to hit her from behind. And he's going to knock her down. She brought her boyfriend, Tom Miller, 6'3", 235 pounds, because she expected some trouble. And she does get it from Jock Semple. Now, if somebody's running and you push them from behind, what can happen? Hit their face, break their nose. Chip their teeth, break their jaw. If they try to halt their fall with their hands, they may break their wrists. So this could be assault. People who work for the marathon tried to physically pull her out of the race. When race official Jock Semple tried to remove her from the race, her boyfriend, Big Tom Miller, 235-pound nationally ranked hammer thrower, who was also running the race, because she said she's running the race, and he said, "Well, if you could do it, I could do it," and he did, pushed Semple to the ground. He was worried about being arrested for assault, even though he's preventing an assault. Oh, by the way, the fragile woman, Switzer, she finished 4 hours and 20 minutes. There is a coup in Greece. April 21st, Greece coup was the culmination of 30 years of national division between forces to the left and right that could be traced back to the time of the resistance against Axis occupation of Greece during World War II. After the liberation in 1944, Greece descended into a civil war fought between the communist forces and the now returned government in exile. Long live democratic Greece, guilty Greek militia hunter for torture, repression, and murder. There was significant limitations on individual rights. Free elections were suspended. It was illegal to strike, to demonstrate, to talk against the government, and to congregate for any purpose except church. There was a war, the Civil War, Nigerian Civil War. And some of you might remember television commercials back in the late 1960s with figures like him asking for money to go to starving children in Biafra. Anybody remember those commercials? Well, I do. I watched TV back then. Anyway, the Republic of Biafra was a state in West Africa started on May 30th, made up of states in the eastern region of Nigeria. And there is Biafran soldiers. There are Biafran soldiers. The Nigerian Civil War started on July 6th. Biafra represented nationalist aspirations of the Biafran people whose leadership felt they could no longer exist with a northern-dominated federal government. Biafra was formally recognized by Gabon, Haiti, Ivory Coast, Tanzania, and Zambia. Other nations that provided support and assistance to Biafra included Israel, France, Spain, Portugal, Norway, Rhodesia, North Africa, and Vatican City. There are two countries missing there. U.S. and Britain. Because they had a vested interest in the Nigerian government. By 1968, Nigerian troops surrounded Biafra, capturing coastal oil cities, or rather coastal oil facilities in the city of Port Harcourt. The blockade led to mass starvation. During the 2.5 years of war, there were about 100,000 overall military casualties, and somewhere between 500,000 and 2 million Biafran civilians starved to death. Biafra. The Loving family. The Lovings. They end, inadvertently, ban on interracial marriage in the United States. The Supreme Court of the United States heard arguments in the Loving versus Virginia case in April. The case centered around Mildred Jeter and Richard Loving, an interracial couple from Virginia who were married in Washington, D.C. in the late 1950s, and they decided to go back to Virginia, and they were charged with breaking the state's law which banned interracial marriage and were jailed. The Lovings sued the state of Virginia and argued that the ban violated the 14th Amendment and was unconstitutional. And there they are, Mildred Loving and her husband. On June 12th, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that state bans on interracial marriage were unconstitutional, and they were solely based on racial discrimination. The decision made interracial marriage legal throughout the United States. By the way, who was the first interracial couple on TV? Lucy and Desi. Lucy and Desi were the first interracial couple on TV. Guess who's coming to dinner?
That movie.
Yeah, that movie. You liked the movie. Yeah, you did. Anybody else like the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, you liked the movie. Guess who's coming to dinner? Guess Who's Coming to Dinner was one of the few films that, first of all, before I go on, the Hays Code, which was established in the movies in 1930 and reinforced by Joseph Green in 1934, prohibited interracial relationships on film. On film. And the first interracial kiss was on Star Trek in 1968. They followed this to the T. Now, this film is kind of different. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner was one of the few films at the time to depict an interracial marriage in a positive light. As interracial marriage historically had been illegal in most of the United States, still illegal in 1967. Still illegal, mostly southern states until June 12th, 6 months before the film was released. Kill the protest. Now, the protests on the college campuses were not against the Vietnam War initially. Initially, not against the Vietnam War. This guy looks like he's ready to kill, doesn't he? In late February, University of Wisconsin-Madison students blocked offices in Bascom Hall to protest the recruitment efforts on campus of the Dow Chemical Company, which made napalm, a flammable gel that horribly burned its victims. Students organized another round of protests against Dow and the war on campus October 17th and 18th as a precursor to a large anti-war national rally that was going to be held the following weekend in Washington, D.C. On October 18th, the protests turned violent. Now, this was not against the war. It was against Dow Chemical. They wanted to recruit students to work for Dow Chemical. But this is where the tide turns on the college campuses, and people like Walter Cronkite tell you about it. The protests made national news, propelling University of Wisconsin-Madison to the forefront of the anti-war movement. It was the start of student demonstrations on campus. You do this in the National Football League, and you're suspended for a few games. It's called clotheslining. And you basically clothesline the guy, knock down the guy. And this is outside Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon, United States military turning their guns on citizens. U.S. troops used rifles in an encounter with anti-war demonstrations outside the Pentagon, across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. and Arlington, Virginia, October 21st. But not all the protests were against the Vietnam War. This is Massachusetts. Love and support our soldiers in Vietnam. There was a high school student by the name of Paul Christopher who decided he couldn't stand hippies anymore. Couldn't stand these long-haired people protesting against the troops in Vietnam. And there is Paul Christopher. Freedom is a must, so is Vietnam. Support our men in Vietnam. He's 19 years old. 25,000 people attended a mass rally in support of American troops in Vietnam in Wakefield, Massachusetts on October 29th. The anti-war demonstration was sponsored by a 19-year-old high school senior, Paul Christopher, who became tired of anti-Vietnam War demonstrations. He did not like an October 16th anti-war rally in Boston, where 280 men burnt their draft cards. Tell me if you've heard these songs, because these were the songs of the day protesting Vietnam. Blowing in the Wind, Bob Dylan, 1963. Phil Oakes, What Are You Fighting For, 1963. Barry McGuire, Eve of Destruction, 1965. Phil Oakes, I Ain't Marching Anymore, 1965. Tom Paxton, Lyndon told the nation. All anti-Vietnam. There was one song that was pro-Vietnam. The Ballad of the Green Berets. This is Barry Sadler, who was on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1966. Staff Sergeant Barry Sadler wrote The Ballad of the Green Beret in honor of James Gabriel, a Hawaiian Green Beret who was executed by the Viet Cong. On January 30th, 1966, Sadler debuted the song on TV on the Ed Sullivan Show, became an immediate hit, selling more than 2 million copies in the first 5 weeks. How many of you remember Arlo Guthrie? Well, you shouldn't remember him, he's still alive. Arlo Guthrie. Well, this is the Guthrie Center. It's up in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. And this is about Alice's Restaurant. Now, anybody familiar with Alice's Restaurant besides you? Okay, I'm going to have to explain this, but I will explain it. Arlo Guthrie was arrested for throwing out garbage. Alice's Restaurant was a restaurant in Great Barrington up in the Berkshires. And this is the story. Arlo Guthrie is arrested and convicted. By the way, Woody Guthrie was his father. He was raised Jewish, Arlo Guthrie, and Maya Kahana was the rabbi who bar mitzvahed him, just in case you needed to know that. Arlo Guthrie is arrested and convicted of dumping trash illegally, which later leads him to be rejected by a draft board due to his criminal record of littering. There was a movie called Alice's Restaurant. There was a song played. If there are any rock stations still out there, and the way things are going in radio, there probably aren't very many left. But every Thanksgiving, it was an FM radio tradition to play the 17-minute song called Alice's Restaurant. Then there's a movie about Alice's Restaurant. So it starts here. The Berkshire Eagle, the newspaper, back in 1965-66. The incident was reported in the Berkshire Eagle on November 29, 1965. It describes the conviction of Richard J. Robbins, age 19, and Arlo Guthrie, age 18, both of the Bronx, for illegally disposing of rubbish, and a fine of $25 each, plus an order to remove the trash. The arresting officer was Stockbridge Police Chief William J. Oberhan, who in the song is called Officer Obie, and the trial was presided over by Special Judge James E. Hannon. It identifies the incriminating evidence as an envelope addressed to a male resident of Great Barrington, presumably Ray Brock rather than Guthrie. And this was the 50th anniversary of Alice's Restaurant in that little museum he has up there. Guthrie explained that he believes that there are such things as just wars, and the message of this song was targeted at Vietnam in particular. And he described the song not so much as an anti-war song, but as an anti-stupidity song. And let me explain the song. So he's going down to Whitehall and Marks, where the Army recruiting station was back in the day, in Lower Manhattan. And they have all the draftees and all, and they separate them, ones who have no criminal record and the ones who do. And Arlo Guthrie has a criminal record, littering. So they put him in with the other guys, killers and all of that other stuff, and they say, "Hey boy, what are you in for?" "Littering." And he says, all the convicts they're all getting away from him. "Littering?" "Littering." He could not serve in the United States military because he was convicted of littering. Had to pay a $25 fine. How many of you remember the song I Say a Little Prayer with Dionne Warwick? Is that a Vietnam protest song? Yes or no? How many say yes, besides me? It is a Vietnam protest song, in a way. Hal David was the lyricist, Burt Bacharach did the music. Lyricist Hal David tried to convey a woman's concern for her man who is serving in the Vietnam War. I Say a Little Prayer was recorded by Dionne Warwick during an April 9, 1966 session. Burt Bacharach did 10 takes on I Say a Little Prayer, disliked the completed track, feeling it was rushed. And they held it until September of 1967. It is a song about a woman who does not want her man in Vietnam. and she's worried to death what is going to happen to him. So it is an anti-war song, although if you listen to the song, it does not seem like it's an anti-war song, but it is. How many of you remember Twiggy?
Yeah.
Yeah, you like Twiggy.
Yes.
Why'd you like her?
She was beautiful.
She's still alive, you know?
She's great.
She's still alive. She's still alive. How many else wanted to like Twiggy? You did? Why?
Too skinny.
She was too scaredy. That's why she was called Twiggy. That's why she was called Twiggy. The model, Twiggy, Leslie Hornby, arrived at New York's Kennedy Airport in March. The New Yorker, Life and Newsweek reported on the Twiggy phenomenon. She's bigger than the Beatles, with the New Yorker devoting nearly 100 pages to the subject. She became an international sensation, modeling in France, Japan, and America. I throw this in because my favorite movie of all time is Mel Brooks' The Producers. And the only, you're laughing at that.
No, it's a good movie.
It's a great movie. And I knew people like that growing up. Anyway, the only reason I bring it up, have you heard the term creative accounting? Yeah, you heard that? You know where it's from? It's from Mel Brooks's mind, creative accounting. Now, I could recite the dialogue. I'll spare you of that right now. The Producers is a satirical comedy film written and directed by Melvin Kaminsky. Brooks won an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. Decades later, the film was selected to be preserved in the National Film Registry and placed 11th on the AFI's 100 Years, 100 Laughs list. Pretty good for a movie that was a bomb at the box office and was actually salvaged by Peter Sellers, who said, go watch this movie. The term creative accounting was first used in 1967 in The Producers. Max Bialystock, he keeps saying that. He's being told that, under certain circumstances, a producer can make more money with a flop than a hit. So, Bialystock, he keeps saying that, but you don't tell me how. How could a producer make more money with a flop than a hit? It's simply a matter of creative accounting, says Leo Bloom. Let's assume away. I told you I'll spare you the dialogue. Let's assume for just a moment that you're a dishonest man. And he explains creative accounting. How many of you have iPhones today? How many of you want that iPhone? It's available, a futuristic phone. The multi-channel video phone was invented and installed by the Nippon Electric Company, Japan. Cost about $1,300 US back in those days, which would be about $4,000 today for a one-channel setup. How many of you play games on your phone? You play games. What games do you play?
Spelling bee.
Spelling bee and things? Well, if you wanted to, back in those days, play with your computer a game, this is how you did it up in Boston. Robert Q, a computer programmed to play chess, was beaten in its first competition with a human in the monthly Boylston Chess Club tournament in Boston on January 21st. The computer was at MIT in Cambridge, across the river, while Carl Wagner, its opponent, made his moves at the YMCU several miles away in Boston. Oh, how did they tell you the moves? How did they get the moves there? They did it the old-fashioned way. Teletype. Teletype. Morse code. Anybody go to Expo 67 Montreal? Back in the day. You went there. Did you like it?
I didn't go there.
Oh, you didn't go. It was probably the most successful World's Fair of the 20th century. Come on. To Expo 67 Montreal. World's Fair was held in Montreal, Quebec, Canada from April 27th to October 29th. It's considered to be the most successful World's Fair of the 20th century. It celebrated Canada's 100th anniversary as a nation. Canada was formed in that building, which was undergoing renovations when I was there last, 6 years ago. Confederate Hall, Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. But Charles de Gaulle comes. He's from France, President of France, and he makes his statement and causes an international outrage. On July 24th, France's Charles de Gaulle stood on the balcony at Montreal City Hall and shouted, "Viva le Québec libre," to the crowd. De Gaulle gave an international voice to Quebec's burgeoning sovereignist movement and caused a diplomatic incident. The Prime Minister, Lester B. Pearson, criticized the speech, saying de Gaulle's statements were unacceptable to the Canadian people. Anybody take the 20th Century Limited? All aboard! Next stop, Anaheim, Azuga. No, they wouldn't go to Anaheim, Azusa, Cucamonga. Cucamonga. The 20th Century Limited passenger train of the New York Central System. That was after its final run in Chicago, Illinois on December 4th. The Century began its run between New York and Chicago in 1902. This guy is a hero to many people. His name is Christian Barnard. On December 3rd, Dr. Christian Barnard transplanted the heart of accident victim Denise Darvaux into the chest of 54-year-old Louis Washkansky, with Washkansky regaining full consciousness and being able to talk easily with his wife, but unfortunately he would die 18 days later from pneumonia, but the heart transplant worked. Well, it is Vietnam, it's the end of the year, and these guys are basically hunkering down, and they got a little Christmas tree. Signaling there may be some hope for 1968. There would be no hope in 1968. Lyndon Johnson would not seek re-election as president of the United States in 1968. Vietnam War would carry on until 1973. Civil rights movement suffered a major blow when the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated on April 4th, 1968. The Greece military junta fell in 1974. In 1970, after 2.5 years of war, during which almost 2 million Biafrans died, British forces surrendered, or rather Biafran forces surrendered to the Nigerian federal military government. This is Senator Mike Braun of Indiana. On March 22nd, 2022, Indiana Senator Mike Braun suggested that the Supreme Court was wrong in ruling in favor of interracial marriages, insisting that the decision should have been left up to states. Then he kind of backtracks by saying, I condemn racism in any form. I'm just a states' rights advocate. There is Joe Biden, and he signs on December 13, 2022, the Respect for Marriage Act that gave federal protections for same-sex and interracial couples. In 2022, the United States Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, allowing states to decide if abortion was illegal. As Quebec City, Wolfe from Britain, Montcalm from France, it's where history changes in North America, where the English sacked Quebec, and basically Quebecois, French, couldn't speak their language, go to church until 1774, when the Brits said, we'll give you some rights because we know we're going to war with the 13 colonies. Quebec never did separate from Canada. The Beatles remain extremely popular despite breaking up in 1969. Israel did reach a peace settlement with Egypt in the 1970s, but Middle East problems remain. The hippies left? No hippie ideology. Mel Brooks became a prolific filmmaker. You can barely see me, but that's me asking Muhammad Ali a question in 1982. The U.S. Justice Department pursued a legal case against Ali and denied his claim for conscientious objective status. He was found guilty of violating Secret Service laws and sentenced to 5 years in prison in June 1967, but remained free while appealing his conviction. The U.S. Supreme Court overturned his conviction in June 1971, allowing Ali to fight on a regular basis. He regained his title on October 30th, 1974, beating George Foreman. Any questions or comments? It is your turn to talk.
Interesting.
Interesting, but you lived it. You lived every day of it. At that point, were you married? 1967?
Yeah.
I was married.
You were married. See, there is a difference in some people. If you were married and you had kids, you didn't pay that much attention to this, what was going on. People who paid attention to this were probably 16 to 23 years old, because they might go to Vietnam. They might very well go to Vietnam. If you were married and had kids, you were more concerned about your job, about your spouse, about your kids making a living. So in a group like this, you may have people with two different types of thoughts because they didn't pay attention. Whereas the ones who were paying attention were the ones who were the most greatly affected by this.
But they didn't draft you if you had children.
You could really get out of Vietnam. I've been told by people, my wife's cousin faked bad eyesight. How could you prove somebody has bad eyesight? Can you see under 80? It's all a blur. They'll give you glasses. You don't have to wear them. If you have flat feet, you know. Quakers at Rutgers. The Quakers set up shop. Told you how to resist the war. Or getting drafted to go to war. Colleges started, professors started in 1965 explaining to students how to avoid the war. Have a bad back. There were no MRIs in those days. No MRIs. Have a bad back. Could they prove that you have a bad back? Couldn't do that. All kind of tricks of the trade. Then they tightened it up in 1969. I went to high school between 1969 and 1973. I'm not going to name names. I knew the people who were teaching at Spring Valley High School at the time. Who were not. You were at Spring Valley High School?
Yes, I was.
What years?
Let's see, I moved to Rockland County in 1961.
61.
So it must have been like in 1967, 68.
I started there at 70. Where's your name?
I lived,
No, your name first.
my name is Ruth Goldberg.
Ruth Goldberg, okay. I didn't have you.
I lived up Cornhill Drive. It wasn't Goldberg at the time. It was Ruth Reich.
Ruth Reich.
R-E-I-S-C-H.
Oh, okay, I didn't have you. Were you at Spring Valley High School in 70, 71, 72, and 73?
Yes.
What courses did you teach?
Social studies and English.
Okay.
I taught in Nyack for one semester
Okay.
when the teacher was out.
Okay. Excuse me for asking her personal questions. Jeff Bray, Martin Levine, Richard Greening, did you know them?
I knew Levine and I might have known Green.
Okay, Levine packed up and just left one day,
Yeah.
which I've heard the story. In English, I had Sandy Didner, Walter Blitz,
Okay.
so,
When I first moved there,
Yeah.
I started a cooperative nursery school
oh, okay.
in Suffern,
Oh, okay.
at the Campbell site. We got we were able to use their whole property, and the city of Suffern was kind enough to give us
Oh.
a playground, and the other three family women who were with me starting this, they were part of the New York City School District,
Oh.
and they were able to furnish us with beautiful desks and seats and easels, and
Oh, cool.
it was wonderful.
I'm gonna tell you one thing about East Ramapo School District. It was one of the best school districts in the country. One of the best. You say the best, that was one of the best.
I'm Joanne Rachel, I graduated Spring Valley Junior High in 1955.
Oh, okay, I graduated in 73, Anybody else? I don't even know what I was talking about at Spring Valley High School, but anyway, I went there. Anybody else? Well, thank you. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's your name?
Evan Wiener.